2012, a golden cape went on display at a museum in London. It was made entirely of spider silk. It took 80 people 4 years and more than 1 million wild golden orb spiders, each one caught in the morning, milked for silk, and released in the evening. One cape, 1 million spiders. That's a pretty good summary of the problem I want to talk about today. Spider silk might be the best structural material nature has ever produced, and for about a century, nobody could figure out how to get more than a handful of it. So here's where we're going. First, why spider silk is actually as impressive as people say. Then why you can't just farm spiders like we would farm silkworms. Then how genetic engineering finally got around that, using yeast, bacteria, and genetically modified silkworms. And at the end, the part that usually gets left out, but still doesn't work. The silk worth caring about is called dragline silk. That's the stuff a spider uses for the spokes of web and for the lifeline it hangs on from a drops out of a tree. By weight, dragline silk is about as strong as steel. That's the fact everybody quotes, but it's not really the impressive one. The impressive one is its toughness. Toughness measures how much energy a material can absorb before it snaps. Steel is strong, but it doesn't stretch much. Kevlar is strong and stiff. Spider silk is strong and stretchy at the same time, so it soaks up something like 5 to 10 times the energy of Kevlar before it fails. And the spider silk does all of this at room temperature, at normal air pressure, using water and digested insects as raw material. No furnace, no petroleum, no toxic solvents. When you're done with it, it biodegrades. If you handed that list of properties to a materials engineer without telling where it came from, they'd assume you made it up, because it's so good. So the obvious question is, why isn't everything made of this already? The answer is the spider. Silkworms domesticated really well. You can stack thousands of them in trays, feed them mulberry leaves, and they'll spin cocoons peacefully right next to each other. That's why silk has been an industry for thousands of years. Spiders won't do that. They're territorial and solitary. If you crowd them together, they eat each other. There is no such thing as a spider farm, and there isn't going to be one. That's exactly why the Cape needed 1 million wild-caught spiders instead of a barn. So starting in the 1990s, researchers made a move that sounds obvious now, but wasn't at the time. Forget the spider, and then take the gene. Spider silk is a protein. Proteins are built from the instructions written in genes, and by the 90s, we could copy a gene out of one organism and paste it into another. The silk proteins are called spidrons, and once you have the gene, the question becomes, what do you put it in? Option 1 is microbes. You insert the spider gene into an engineered bacteria or yeast, grow them in a big fermentation tank on a plant sugar, harvest protein by the vat. A German company called Amsilk did this with E. coli. A California company, Bolt Threads, did it with yeast. A Japanese company, Spiber, used fermentation too, though they've engineered their proteins pretty far away from the original spider sequence to get a better performance. Option 2 is more clever and honestly kind of funny. Instead of building a factory, use the animal that's already a factory. Put spider silk genes into domesticated silkworms, and they spin a hybrid fiber that's part silkworm protein and part spider protein, using the same farming methods people have used for centuries. That's the approach a company called Craig Biocraft has taken. There was also a third option in the early 2000s that I have to mention. A Canadian company put spider silk genes into goats and harvested the protein out of their milk. It technically worked, but the company went bankrupt. Here's the thing though. Having a tank full of dissolved silk protein does not mean you have silk. It means you have expensive glue. What makes silk is how it gets assembled on the way out. Inside a spider's spinning duct, the protein solution is pulled through a narrowing channel. As it moves, the acidity changes, ions get swapped out, and the flow physically stretches the molecules and forces them into a very specific structure, stiff, crystal-like blocks embedded in a soft, rubbery background material. The stiff blocks give you strength. The soft material gives you stretch. The toughness comes from having both. You only get both if the assembly conditions are exactly right. The spider does all of that in a duct a few millimeters long in real time while hanging in midair. Copying that industry took decades. It's the main reason lab-made silk kept underperforming the real thing. It's also why the silkworm approach is smart. The worm already has the plumbing built in. So how's it going? Better than most people realize. Craig Biocraft reported producing almost 2.5 metric tons of recumbent spider silk in a single production cycle in mid-2026, which is a record, a number that would have sounded ridiculous 10 years ago. Spiber's fermentation protein fiber has been in actual commercial clothing since 2019, starting with a North Face jacket. Now comes out of mass production plant in Thailand. Silk has been selling silk protein for cosmetics, medical coatings for over a decade. The medical uses might up mattering the most. Silk protein doesn't trigger much of an immune response and it breaks down safely in the body, which makes it useful for things like coatings on surgical mesh and catheters, wound dressing, and scaffolds for growing tissue. Now the honest part. Cost is still the biggest wall. These fibers are competing with polyester that costs about $1 a kilogram, which is why these products are so far the luxury jackets and watch straps and not normal t-shirts. Some of these protein fibers have had problems with shrinking when they get wet, though companies have been working on that by tweaking the protein sequences. And this is the field that has a long track record of competent predictions that didn't pan out on schedule. The part I find interesting is the shape of the story. We spent hundreds of years trying to get silk out of spiders, and the breakthrough came when we stopped copying the animal and started copying its instructions instead. Then we spent another 20 years discovering that the instructions were the easy part. The spider's trick was never the protein, it was the plumbing. That's the pattern that shows up in all of our biotechnology right now. Reading nature's blueprints turned out to be fast. Reproducing nature's manufacturing is the slow, unglamorous, decades-long part. That's where most of the actual difficulty lives. That golden cape needed 1 million spiders. Today, a single facility can spin tons of the stuff out of silkworms and sugar. Whether it gets cheap enough to end up in your closet is still an open question. But it's a much better question than the one we were stuck on a century ago.